need people to volunteer to serve so that we can have a strong military that serves as a deterrent, keeps us safe, and so forth. And by the way, it is a great way to serve the country, and you'll get more out of it than you ever put into it. And that's really one of the reasons I appreciate the connection between the American Legion and Boys Day, because there is that natural connection. But committing to the work, it is a commitment. And there are some people, quite frankly, who, especially I think, in elective office, there's an allure to the position. Maybe they're looking for some glamour, some notoriety, or whatever, and they like having the position. They like speaking to the media. They like, but they're not necessarily rolling up their sleeves every day and trying to figure out what policies are best to meet the moment. What challenges are really causing problems in our communities and in our families, and then how to respond to that. And it's there is a difference, and that's kind of why I said, there's a difference between show horses on the one hand and work horses on the other. We're all much better served if we're doing the work. And it is hard work. And today, and in politics, especially in today's climate, it is probably harder than ever. There are a lot of blessings associated with the internet and with social media. Some wonderful things. I'm on day 160 today of doing the Bible in a year, and I use my phone every morning to do that. If you just did your math, yeah, I'm about 2.5 weeks behind. But I'm going to make that up over the course of the summer. But people expressing themselves calling. It is incredibly important, and it is incredibly rewarding as well. Despite the difficulties that come with it, we had 19 federally declared disasters in my 8 years as governor, and that doesn't count the state ones. And as you know, we had the pandemic, and you got all these things. I mean, it can be really tough. But if you go to work every day and you work hard, and you believe that you make a difference, then that is also rewarding. And one of the things that I want to make sure that you understand is I'm not just talking about elected public service. And I know we're waiting on the results of an election here, but public service, those are your everyday servants, your police officers, the people at the fire department, you name it. Public service is incredibly important. So please commit to the work. Be open to it. See if that might be something that appeals to you and a way for you to contribute, whether it is a career or not. And by the way, most elected officials at the local level, or at least many of them, they still have other careers too. And then they're a school board member, or they're a police jury member. So there are all sorts of ways to do this. Louisiana needs you. Your country needs you, and more than ever. So please be open to that. I'm again very happy to have all of you in my home parish here in Tangipahoa Parish. This is the 85th year of Bowie State, for the very first time, to my knowledge, that it's ever been here in Hammond. Oh, Dr. Wainwright, the president of Southeastern, who made this possible for you all to be here. Thank you very much. So with that, I'm gonna wish you good luck. Again, I congratulate the winners. I thank everybody for being here. And I guess I'm gonna thank you in advance for your questions, although some questions can be hard. So I will do my best. And Nancy, I don't know how we're gonna do the question.
Yes, sir. So gentlemen, we will open to your questions now. What we ask you to do is raise your hand whenever you're ready to ask a question. We'll walk around with a microphone and get it to you.
We have one first up here, but I'll come to all that side, okay? Governor Edwards, who or what is your biggest inspiration?
I'm sorry, who's asking the question?
Okay,
I didn't see that. I'm sorry, so what's the question again?
Who or what is your biggest inspiration?
Oh, wow. I've said this before. People assume it was my dad. I love my dad, and my mom and dad are both gone now. But he was an elected official. He served in the 1973 Constitutional Convention and so forth, and I followed him into elective office. But the truth is, it was my mother, more than my dad, because of the nature of her work, caring for the poorest of the poor every day, and then coming home and sharing those stories with us. So as an aside, and by the way, if I say something and y'all think it's not good policy or whatever, then you're not hurting my feelings. Believe what you want to believe. But because I was raised by a mother who took care of people who couldn't afford health insurance, they couldn't afford to pay for their care. It was literally a charity hospital. It influenced me in how I looked at the Affordable Care Act and whether I was going to expand Medicaid so that several 100,000 working poor people in Louisiana would have the ability not to get their care only through an emergency room, but to actually have, by the way, the emergency room is the most costly, least effective way to manage health and to manage disease and so forth. But to expand healthcare coverage for working poor people, which was something I did on my very first day in office. And so I point specifically to my mother on that. And even though my mother and my father were both very religious, we're Catholic, it was my mother who was my catechism teacher. And so she tied all of that together. And for me, in particular, Matthew 25, but I'm gonna leave it there. But thank you.
Governor Edwards,
There you go.
so I say this a lot in the United States today, but how did you as governor deal with having a legislature vastly composed of the opposing party?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I had been in the legislature myself for 8 years before becoming governor. And so I had relationships with the vast majority of legislators while I was governor that preceded, that were created before I became governor. That is really, really important. Because it is still possible, even though it's increasingly hard to do, it is still possible in Louisiana to have good relationships with people of the opposite party, to have good communications, and then work with them to figure out what's most important to them in terms of what they want to do, what they don't want to do. You share your opinions, you figure out where there's common ground, and so it was really the relationships that we had. The other thing is, I tried very hard, and people's definitions of what is extreme and what's moderate and what's right and what's wrong, they're all different. I didn't try to govern from one extreme or the other. I tried to govern basically from the middle. And it was a relatively good fit for where the state is. I think that was evidenced by the fact that I got reelected. But it was challenging. I do not mean to indicate it wasn't challenging. It's very challenging because we had huge problems. Now, you all are about 16, 17 years old. So in 2016, when I first became governor, it's almost 10 years ago. Y'all were 7 and 8. You may not remember what those days were like. But we had just cut higher education more than any other state in the nation. We had a $2 billion budget deficit. And things were just really, really tough. And I got elected on a platform where we weren't going to keep cutting, that we were going to stabilize and start investing more. Many people got elected to the legislature saying they were never going to vote for any revenue. And new revenue has to have a 2/3 vote, a simple majority is enough. And so that was a very, very difficult path to navigate, but we were able to do it. We raised additional revenue. Yeah, we made cuts too, but we raised additional revenue, not always the way I would have preferred, but we worked together and we compromised. And so it can be done. It's just very difficult. But the only way I could ever accomplish anything was on a bipartisan basis. And so maybe that colors my view of bipartisanship, how important it is, and that it is still possible.
Hi, Mr. Governor, I'm Jerry Powell from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My question for you today is, which advice you would like to give to places like the government want to be in a position that you're in?
You want to be in the position that I'm in as a former governor? No, so work hard and really apply yourself. Put forth your best effort, whether it's in college or your first job or whatever it is. Understand that while you think you're making decisions right now that may not be terribly important for you over the course of your life, many of your decisions that you're making today are. I'm going to tell you, be careful what you post on the internet. When you apply for a job, y'all may not know it. The first thing that prospective employer is going to do is go look and see what kind of person you are. What kind of pictures are you posting? What kind of words? What is it that you like and you don't like? So just be careful with all of that. But the other thing I'm going to say is that you really should be open to to public service and just doing a really good job. And when I went to the legislature, I can honestly tell you, it did not occur to me that I was going to run for governor. I wanted to be a state representative, and I didn't think about anything beyond that. But over the course of time, I obviously became interested and thought that you might be right, and there was particular reasons that I wanted to run. So what I'm trying to say is be open to it, even if it's not something that you are embracing or actively considering today. Things change, and just be open to it, and then you gotta pick your opportunities. And if you really today, if you know you want to seek elective office at a significant level, for most people, you cannot succeed if that's the first office you ever run for. And so if you really want to do that, you probably need to do something else first, like run for city council, run for parish police jury, run something like that. And you kind of get a feel for what politics is like, and you get more comfortable with it. You get more time speaking in public, all of those sorts of things. But most people who just decide, I'm going to run for the United States Senate, unless you're extremely, extremely wealthy, it's very hard to be successful, because election day is going to come. There's a good chance nobody will have heard of you, So that's the best advice I think I can give today.
Good morning, Donor Edwards. My name is Zach Freeloop, and I'm from New Orleans. My question is, how did attending a military academy better prepare you for the work that you've done in the past and continue to do?
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, I was about your age. I was 17 when I was, I was 17 when I went to West Point. I was 16 when I was nominated by the 2 U.S. senators. I had no idea then how that was going to change my life. That really is the point I was trying to make in answering that previous question. I knew I wanted to be in the Army. I knew I wanted to be an officer. I knew I wanted to serve in that capacity. But I genuinely believe that in a state that leans right, I was able to be elected as governor statewide because I had been to West Point, and enough people who ordinarily would not have given consideration to my candidacy, they did. Because of that, and then I was able to communicate with them and actually get enough of those people to vote for me. So just from a political sense, it really helped. But it's much more important to me, just the experience that I had at West Point. It's a great institution of higher education, for one, often rated the #1 public institution for higher education in the country. So it's a great opportunity, but they focus on leadership skills, and not just theoretical, but when you're actually in leadership positions, kind of like you are here at Boise State, and you all back in whatever schools and organizations you belong to. And then you go out and you actually lead a platoon. In my case, I was an infantry officer. Back then, they were all men. So I led a platoon of 30 men. I commanded a company after that. These are all really, really good experiences that help you prepare, not just for being governor, but prepare for leadership anywhere. We need good leaders everywhere. We've got Michelle Sutton here, who leads the largest healthcare provider in our parish. Leadership is important at North Oaks Hospital. Leadership is important here at Southeastern Louisiana University. And so it's one of the reasons I said I really appreciate the American Legion being the entity that really organized, runs, promotes Boise State, because you do have that connection to the military. And I would hope it's something that you all are open to. And aside from what it will do for you, It's just a great way to serve your country. Whether or not you make a career out of it, you may only stay for 3 or 5 years, or you may stay for 35 years. I'm so proud of some classmates that I have. The most senior Army officers today are my good friends and classmates from the class of 1988. Anyway, so I will just tell you, the other thing is, and didn't realize this was going to happen until I became governor. When you are preparing for and responding to a natural disaster, that is very similar to a military operation. It is very similar to that. When you call all of your leaders together, and of course the National Guard, the number one, well, they have the most people, and they probably have the most responsibility for all of that. So having that experience in the Army that became available to me through West Point, I think helped in that regard too.
Hi, my name is Lincoln Trumps, and I'm from Lafayette, Louisiana. And I don't know if you would consider yourself a blue dog Democrat, but I've often heard the term applied to you. And my grandmother is a special ed teacher, and she voted for you twice. But at the most recent election, she voted for Governor Landry. And the reason she gave is that she feels like the Democratic Party has kind of shifted away from those working class values. And so my question for you is, do you think the blue dog Democrat, in the South especially, has a political future, or do you think that that breed of Democrat is likely to kind of fade away?
Well, I mean, I was governor here until January of 24, right? So it wasn't that long ago, it was just 18 months ago. And I don't know that things have shifted that much over that period of time. But I would tell you, things are changing on both sides of the political spectrum. And I don't know that anybody can sit here today and know with precision what the future is going to look like in parties, what parties, have an enduring appeal to certain citizens. So, and I really don't want to be terribly, just political from a partisan perspective here this morning. But the answer is, yeah, I do. But what has to happen is people have to offer themselves for public office. I do believe that the majority of people in Louisiana are clustered towards the center of the political spectrum, but all the oxygen is taken up by people who are at the extremes. And so that's sort of the more difficult thing. Another reason why I think it's possible in Louisiana to a degree that it may not be in other states, like Louisiana, especially deep South states, is that we don't have the party primaries. Because party primaries tend to filter out moderates and only produce extremes. And so we don't do that in Louisiana. So there's still a viable path for moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans, by the way, to run and win. And so, yeah, I do believe that. Now, I'm not naive. It's hard. I think the Democrat starts off at a generic Democrat starts off at a disadvantage, but it's not insurmountable. And I think that I'm proof of that.
Hey, Governor Edwards. My name is Christian Frazier, and I'm from the city of Bogalusa, Annapolis, Louisiana. I have a simple
Are you a
question.
lumberjack?
I used to be.
Okay.
No longer. But I have a simple question. Since you are no longer governor, what do you spend your free time doing?
My free time? Donna and I are the proud grandparents of 2 granddaughters that, the first one was elected just a couple days before I left office. And the second was elected, I'm sorry, did I say elected? Born a couple of days before I left office. And then the second was born 7 months ago. So we spent a lot of time doing that. I am not retired. A lot of people think I'm retired. I'm not. I'm practicing law again with a law firm out of New Orleans, but offices in Baton Rouge as well. But most of my free time is spent on the little farm that I have on the Tangipahoa River. I love to just drive my tractor. That's a very therapeutic thing for me to do. And so I love to spend some time out there, and I got a handful of animals, and then of course it gives me a place to hunt and to fish and all of that sort of stuff. So that's really what I love doing today.
Well, Governor Edwards, my name is David Kwong. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Since it's been a little time since your time in office as governor, I just wanted to ask you, if you could go back and redo your administration since 2016, what are a couple of changes you would like to have?
Yeah. If only you could redo certain things, right? I actually think about this quite a bit. And probably everybody out there, you already have an opinion of something I did that I shouldn't have, or something that I wasn't able to accomplish that you wish that I had, or something that I didn't even try to accomplish that you wish I had. And really, I kind of go back and forth on that. I guess, there are a couple of things that I genuinely believe would benefit our state and particularly our working families. And I was just never able to do it. And we do not have a state minimum wage. And so our minimum wage is set by the federal government. It hasn't increased since 2009, despite all of the inflation that has happened over the years. And so we weren't trying to do $15 or $20, but just some sort of a meaningful increase to $10 or $11, whatever. Weren't able to do that. And I felt particularly bad about that because I know, the vast majority of Louisiana wanted that to happen, but I could not get the legislature to do it. And so that was, it would be easy for me to say, well, I tried, the legislature didn't do it, so if that's a failure, it's on them, it's not on me, except that that's not the way it is as governor. You're responsible for what happens and what doesn't happen, and you're supposed to, especially things like that are functional. So that's one. And there are some other examples, but I don't want, overall, I'm very pleased with what we were able to accomplish while I was governor. And I don't dwell on the things we were unable to do that much. I told you we were $2 billion short in deficit when I became governor. I left $3 billion in the bank when I left. We had the lowest unemployment rate in the history of our state, the 5th fastest growing economy, more people insured with health insurance. We didn't have the nation's highest incarceration rate. I can just keep going down the list. And so I choose to focus on those things rather than on the things that we weren't able to get done.
Andrew Nicholson from New Iberia. I would like to ask, what you consider your greatest accomplishment in your life and or career?
Yeah, so, the greatest, to me, the best thing that I did as governor, I'll answer that question first, was on my first day when I expanded Medicaid. I really thought that it helped us with the budget problems, but more than that, it really shored up our healthcare providers. And on an individual basis, people had access to preventative care, prescription drugs, specialists that they had never had before. And I'm not pretending it was perfect, but it was so much better than what we had. And so that was I think the single best thing that happened while I was governor. But in terms of me and my life, and how fortuitous was this, how blessed was I met my wife when I was in the 7th grade. She was in the 6th grade. And her family moved to Amy, Louisiana, and I looked up at school one day, and there she was. She's my wife some 36 years later. We've got 3 kids and 2 grandkids, and that has clearly been the best part of my life.
Excuse me. Hey, Colonel Edwards. I'm Jordan Tate from Bogalusa, Louisiana. Talk about budget deficits. Like, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, so the budget deficits were hard. First of all, y'all were too young, you're not gonna remember. We had legislative session and they passed the budget that I didn't like, so I vetoed it. And I called them in and asked them to pass revenue and they didn't, and so I called them in again. And I'm pretty hard-headed, and eventually we were able, throughout all of those efforts, to come together and agree on an amount of revenue that we would raise. I could only get the 2/3 vote to raising a significant part of it by increasing the sales tax. Not my preferred way to do it, because I think sales taxes are regressive, and I think there were better, fairer ways to do it. But we do have probably the least regressive sales tax in Louisiana, because it doesn't, the state portion of the sales tax doesn't affect residential utilities, prescription drugs, or groceries. And so for those reasons, that was the path we had. We took it. And in short order, we really did stabilize our state. And then by year 3, we were starting to make significant investments, including right here at Southeastern, but across the state in education at all levels. And so that's how we did it. And then over time, that extra penny of sales tax actually got reduced. And when I left office, there was 0.45 pennies left of that additional sales tax. So a little more than half of it had actually gone off the books. But we were still adequately budgeting for our priorities and running significant surpluses. That's how we left the $3 billion in the bank. And so, but it was the efforts we made in that first year that set the course that made that possible.
Hello, former governor, my name is David Thibodeau. I'm from Lafayette, Louisiana. And my question for you is this: was there ever like a bill that was proposed that went against your personal beliefs, and how did you navigate that?
Well, if there was a bill that went against my personal beliefs to the point where I just wasn't going to be able to sleep at night, I wasn't going to be comfortable, then I would veto it. I mean, I didn't veto everything I disagreed with, because some things are relatively harmless, even if you disagree with them, but there are a handful of things that you just look at and you say, man, I just can't sign that. I don't think that that's right. And I'm not going to do it just to avoid a showdown over whether my veto is going to be sustained. And there were a number of those. I mean, I was determined not to sign a bill that made it harder to register to vote, harder to stay registered to vote, harder to cast your vote, harder to have your vote counted. And in my view, there were a number of bills that were presented to me that did just that. And, we just weren't having problems in Louisiana with our elections. And the bills, I thought, responded to something that wasn't real. And so I just wasn't going to do it. And that's just one example that comes to mind. But at the end of the day, I mean, you do your best you can, but you have to be principled on those core convictions that you're just not going to be happy with yourself if you compromise on those. You can compromise, but there are certain things that you just can't.
Sir, my name is Vincent Catroni, and I'm from Baton Rouge. I'm wondering, after your time of service, what made you want to come back to Louisiana and become a state representative?
Well, I've always loved our state. I love Tampa Parish, Amy, the church that I grew up in. It was always my intention to come back. I mean, and I understand the question is what made me come back. I never considered not coming back. I always thought I would go to law school, whether it happened when it did, after 8 years in the Army or after I'd been in the Army for a career. I intended to come back and go to law school. I did that, and I practiced law in my hometown of A&E. And I just, this is Louisiana is a special place. You travel the country and, yeah, I mean, maybe there's some places where the weather's better, and maybe there are some more opportunities depending on what your education is, or your degree is in, or whatever. But when you look at our state and the people here, our history, our culture, the food, the music, the faith, the patriotism, if you just put all of those things together, there was just never anywhere else that I want to be. And that's true today, by the way. I mean, it just has never occurred to me to go somewhere else.
My name is Bertie Hicks, and I'm from Minden, Louisiana. And I was just wondering, what was the most beneficial connection or relationship you made with someone else who served in public service?
So one of the great things about going to West Point, being in the Army, and by the way, you're going to experience this for the rest of your lives because of Boy State. You don't know it yet. But that I developed friendships, relationships with people literally all over the country. And as governor, I was able to develop relationships with other governors, and Donna with other first spouses. And that has proven to be just a tremendous blessing for us. And by the way, many of my closest relationships with other governors, and this may surprise you all, are with Republican governors. Charlie Baker out of Massachusetts, and I'm very, very good close friends. Asa Hutchinson out of Arkansas. And to be sure, I'm really good friends with Roy Cooper out of North Carolina, and Bill Murphy in New Jersey. But those relationships really mean a lot. And they mean a lot today because you can still call those people when something comes up. But having those relationships in place while you were governor is good, because that's another resource. That's somebody else you can call and ask, have you had this problem? If so, how did you think about it? What did you do to try to resolve it? There's a lot more of that among governors than you might imagine, because every state only has one governor. And I'm not putting down on people in the legislative branch or in Congress, but there are 435 members of the House. No one person is singularly responsible if something passes or fails in the legislative branch. But every governor is responsible for what happens and doesn't happen while they're in office. And so having relationships with other governors is incredibly important, especially when you're calling on other states to help you respond to a disaster, which is why we never hesitated to send people to other states when they needed help, because we were going to be the state that more often than any other would be asking for help.
Governor Edwards, time for one more question.
All right.
Hello, my name is Aiden Avery, and I'm from Slidell, Louisiana. My question for you today is, what's your biggest obstacle growing up?
Biggest obstacle growing up? Golly. I wouldn't trade when, where, and how I grew up with anybody in the world. And so I don't know. I will tell you what I thought was an obstacle. When I went through school, I went to public school, Tangipahoa Parish. I went to Amite Elementary, I went to Westside Middle School, and I went to Amite High School. We graduated with about 90 people. Trigonometry was the highest math class that was offered. I show up at West Point, I start talking to my classmates about where they graduated and how big their class was and some of the stuff that they had an opportunity to study. And I really felt inadequate for a little bit. And I thought maybe I was going to be challenged to the point where I wasn't going to be successful. But what I found out was the education I received in Tangipahoa Parish, Louisiana public schools more than adequately prepared me. My teachers were wonderful. They were caring people. Half of them black, half of them white. And my black teachers were educated at Southern, a few of them at Grambling. And that whole experience, I think just really caused me to appreciate educators and public education, whether you're in public school or private school, parochial school. I want them to be successful. I want everybody to get a great education regardless of where they go. I just happen to be a beneficiary of public school. But there was a short period of time where I thought that it might not have been adequate to the task, and it turned out that it absolutely was. And then I'll go a little further than that. When I got out of the Army, my wife became an elementary music teacher. She taught at Amite Elementary, where I had gone. That's where our kids were. My oldest daughter was born with spina bifida. She had all sorts of challenges. She had an individual education plan, and she was educated right there in that school, and did remarkably well considering all of that. And then she ended up here at Southeastern, where she got a degree and then got a master's degree, and then worked before she had her baby in the Office for Students with Disabilities. Would not have been possible without, in fact, my first grade teacher was still at Amite Elementary. So I tell you that it's because it was so important to me, and then it turned out to be important to my children as well. And the larger lesson in that is that education is very important for all of us. Having a solid education, taking advantage of the opportunities that you have now to learn, to master key concepts. And by the way, the most important thing about learning today is learning how to learn. Because over the course of your working lives, what you're going to need to know to adequately do your job, the skills that you're going to need to have are going to change. Used to be, you could get a job when you were 18, 19 years old. You were retired 40 years later, and you were doing the same thing. That is not going to be the case with you all because of machine learning and AI and everything that's happening with technology. The most important skill that you can develop right now is learning how to learn. And it starts with literacy and being able to read and understand concepts. So that is not what you asked me, but I felt like saying it because it's incredibly important. I think I was told that's the last question. So you all are probably waiting to see who you elected. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to spend some time with you today. Thank you for taking the opportunity to participate in Voice Day and for being here in Hannah. So thank you all.
One more time, fellas, give it up. Give it up. I know everyone is eagerly